I'm now joined by Michèle Flournoy, former Undersecretary of Defense for Policy during the Obama administration. She's also the co-founder and managing partner of WestExec Advisors. Michèle Flournoy, it's great to see you. Thank you so much for joining us. Let me ask you a kind of tough question. You once did a great program called the Solarium Exercise about strategic choices and the importance of strategic clarity in having them. And for our audience, this is a great thing to Google about what the Eisenhower administration did when it came in from Truman. And they put together a pool of national security officials and had a classified encounter and a clash of different views and a debate in the government. And I'm just wondering, Michèle, if you were to run the Solarium exercise for the Biden administration or these times, what would be the factors that would be on your dashboard?
So great to be with you, Steve. And thanks for raising Solarium. It's probably one of the best examples of strategy done well in the U.S. government in history. And what really made it compelling is that Eisenhower created a friendly but competitive process where he put a senior official in charge of one of each of three groups and really asked the question, what should our strategy be with the Soviet Union be? And each group went off and came up with their own best assessment and their own strategy. And then in the presentation of those to the president, they really debated the different assumptions, the different trade-offs, the different benefits and risks. And a lot of what came out of that, it was the sort of collective endeavor that really produced the framework for containment that governs so much of the Cold War period. So if I were advising the Biden administration today, I would encourage them to do something similar for China, not because I think we're in a Cold War with China, this is a very different situation, but because I think we're going to need a whole of government, whole of nation approach to competing with China where we need to cooperating with China where we need to, and most importantly, to deterring conflict with China, to preventing that competition from becoming actual open conflict.
Michèle, where I see a lot of consensus right now in Washington between the Trump administration, between Biden supporters in Congress, both parts of the aisle, is the posture on China. Be tough on trade, be tough on technology. What I don't see is any consensus on what to do. Do we double the size of the National Science Foundation budget? Do we create a Manhattan Project around AI and quantum and other, cutting edge technologies so that it has less to do with hitting China and has more to do with investing in the capacity in America? Are you disturbed that consensus doesn't seem to be coming together yet?
I think it's early days for the Biden administration. I do agree that there is a strong amount of bipartisan consensus on the diagnosis of the China problem or the China challenge. And I also, though, think we're starting to hear clues from President Biden and his team about how they're thinking about this. The first thing is they're putting an emphasis on investing in the drivers of our own competitiveness here at home. You're going to see it in the infrastructure bill. You're going to see it in investments in key technology areas where we must remain competitive. You're going to see it in research and development more broadly. The president just talked about investing 2% of GDP in research in his recent press conference. So, I think you're going to start seeing that as the first pillar. And that's correct. We have to be strong at home, both to counter the Chinese narrative of U.S. decline, but also really to have the basis for competing both technologically and economically and ultimately in the security domain. The second key pillar they're talking about is allies, that we're going to be much stronger dealing with China alongside like-minded allies and partners. You saw the first effort with the Quad, which was, I think, a great instinct and a great success. You'll see other efforts reaching out to our friends in Europe and across the Indo-Pacific. That's another key piece. I think the third pillar is going to be deterrence, really shoring up deterrence with China to try to avoid any kind of miscalculation. The Chinese have kind of drunk their own Kool-Aid. They have convinced themselves that we are a nation in decline. So the sooner we show that we're recovering from COVID, that we're getting back on our feet economically, that we're addressing key domestic challenges, and the sooner they see us investing in key technology areas and in really modernizing and transforming our military to be really optimized for deterrence in the Indo-Pacific, the more that we're going to counter that narrative and shore up our ability to deter them.
Michèle, I know you're a serious strategist, and I want our audience to know that you have a distinguished career in this, and I'm occasionally reckless. And in my, I remember when the Obama administration came in, there were some doubts about him on national security, and I wrote a piece at that time that said, he's going to have to prove himself by finding a small country to bomb or something like that. But I guess my question is, in these times, after we've had 4 years of America First, where one of the biggest consequences is our allies aren't sure that we'll be with them in their dark days. There's the foe problem, but there's also the ally problem. I just sometimes wonder if we need, this sounds reckless and I don't mean it to be. Do we need some form of demonstration project, some proof of America's commitment in the field militarily to reassure our allies and to also send a signal to our foes?
Well, I don't think we need a demonstration project in the form of a war or a conflict. I do think the demonstration project is showing up, is consulting with them before we announce our own policies. It's engaging them on common projects, whether it's rethinking NATO's strategic concept, or how are we going to manage Afghanistan, or how are we going to compete with and also cooperate with China in key areas like climate and pandemic and so forth. So it is really how we show up. And it's also showing up alongside them in more obscure but really, really important areas like standard setting bodies for the internet and for technology. At some level, this is not just a US-China competition, but it is a competition between democratic systems, free market systems, and authoritarian systems. And our problem has been in the last 4 years, we really haven't been showing up alongside our allies to really push for the kinds of norms and rules of the road that we need to have in place to reflect our own interests and values.
And the cost of showing up is so low. You mentioned NATO. About 25 years ago, you and Hans Benendijk and I and some others had a discussion on whether NATO should continue. The Soviet Union had dissolved, the Berlin Wall had come down. I was in the advocacy, say, let's rethink it all. You were in the advocacy, no, NATO is really, really important. I think if you look back, you won that argument. I was wrong, you were right. Acknowledge it here and now. But I think the question is, as you look ahead at what NATO has done and how this alliance has worked, as you look 25 years ahead, what are some of the ways that institution, which has been so vital to our security, could continue to be evolved and continue to be relevant?
So I think NATO is very strong as a conventional military alliance and as a political military forum for our allies and for us. I think given the evolution of the threat, particularly from Russia, NATO has to get a lot better in dealing with challenges in the gray zone, cyber challenges, propaganda and disinformation challenges, election interference, and so forth. So it needs to have a bit more of a whole of government approach where we bring not only our militaries together, but our other agencies of government to try to deal with these kinds of challenges. Because obviously, this is Putin's KGB playbook. He loves to use it despite, as Secretary Hagel said, the inherent weakness and decline of Russia. He's still playing a very weak hand very well and sort of playing the role of the spoiler. But others are learning from that. You are watching China starting to pick up some of those approaches, Iran, and others. So we have to become more effective dealing with the gray zone challenges than we are today. And I think NATO is a great starting point for doing that.
Michèle, if I can just ask you one last question. We have the Chiefs of Staff of the Air Force and the Army, General Charles Brown Jr. and General James McConville, coming on shortly. Greetings, gentlemen. And we're going to talk about some things, but among them are the Joint All-Domain Command and Control Connect Everything project. It sounds super cool. We're going to learn more about it in a minute. But it begs the question of what I was talking to Secretary Hagel about, which is, is one of our blind spots that we're not investing in connectivity, in platforms? I mean, part of it is the number of ships and planes and systems you have, the number of personnel, but also the technology. I just want to know if we're at an inflection point where we think we may be spending a lot on defense and security, but we actually need to be repositioning some of that spending.
Yeah, I think, all of the war games that the Pentagon has done recently, if accurately reported, suggest that the currently programmed force is not going to keep our edge over the next decade. And we will gradually lose our confidence in our ability to deter. And the reason for that is that we are overinvested in legacy systems and underinvested in the technologies and capabilities that are going to ensure that those aircraft carriers, those fighter squadrons, those army units are actually survivable and resilient and able to move, communicate, target, strike in a much more contested and lethal environment where our networks are going to be under constant attack and disruption. The Chinese doctrine talks about systems destruction warfare. They hope to end the fight before we even engage by taking down our command and control system and our ability to move and target and communicate. And so that means we have to build a resilient network of networks, which is what joint all-domain command and control is really about. That needs to be one of the big bets that the Pentagon places in the next 4 years if it's going to have what we need to deter in the next 40. Placing that bet, investing in the AI that will help us make better, faster decisions than our adversary, investing in autonomous systems and human-machine teaming to leverage unmanned systems to help correct the quantitative disadvantage that we will be at in the Asian theater. I mean, these are all big examples of big bets that the Pentagon urgently needs to place if we're going to really shore up deterrence against a competitor like China in the future.
Well, Michèle Flournoy, former Undersecretary of Defense for Policy, the person that helped bring the solarium back into discussion, and someone that President Obama, President Biden, President Clinton, Hillary Clinton, when she was running, so many people looked to you for your expertise on national security and strategy. We really appreciate you sharing your thoughts with us today.
Thanks so much. Good to be with you.